With 5 primetime games, are the Atlanta Falcons poised to shine or burn underneath the spotlight this season?
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On the Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is sponsored by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code Locked On NFL, and you'll get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. So if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, aka the iron that sharpens the iron, aka Mr. AKA, and I've been covering the Atlanta Falcons for almost 2 decades, formerly at falcfans.com, RIP. Still going strong as the humble host of this illustrious podcast, coming up on 9 years when a certain person and myself on Thanksgiving took over as the co-host of the Locked On Falcons podcast. That is coming up, and I appreciate each and every one of you that were there 9 years ago when we had our boy Tom Melton on and talk about the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah.
He's beating up on Ulrich John, right? And I appreciate all you everydayers, right? And all you got to do to become an everydayer is listen to the podcast each and every day. And all you got to do is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And of course, guys, as you heard, my guest today is none other than Allen Strk, my former co-host here on the Locked On Falcons podcast, my former co-host on the Falc Fans podcast. It's all coming back for part 2. If you missed our part 1 of myself and Allen's conversation, we talked about the practice squad additions. We talked about some, things that we're excited to see about the Falcons offense, things that we are a little bit more skeptical about with the Falcons offense, in a part 1 talking about 10 bold predictions that Allen made, but only 4 of those came on the offensive side of the ball. We'll talk about the other 6 on the defensive side of the ball. But before we get into that, Allen, we kind of touched upon that in part 1, but the Falcons are going to be under the spotlight this upcoming season. 5 primetime games, 3 of their first 6 games in the first 7 weeks of the regular season are going to be on primetime. Are you feeling good about everybody on the planet being able to watch the Atlanta Falcons, a team that we know under the national spotlight is never, ever going to let us down and embarrass us?
I always absolutely love primetime just because it allows us to watch the rest of the league. Maybe that's just like a selfish thing, or not even a selfish thing. It's just a preference, and I just like the idea of you're under the spotlight, like everyone's watching, and people actually care, because there was a time period where the Falcons couldn't have been more relevant, and we didn't really have that. It was just the standard 1:00 game. So it's cool to play against the top teams and test yourself. So I'm all for it. I do think it's a little bizarre just because this team has not made the playoffs since 2017, but I understand that there are a lot of exciting pieces of the Falcons, and they are entertaining, both good and bad. And these are appealing matchups too. When you look at the teams, you look at Buffalo, you look at Minnesota, even San Francisco. Like, these are teams that people want to watch. So why not pair them? And you look at last year, the games against Philadelphia and Washington. I was at both games, and they were a joy to cover. It was absolute thrilling 4 quarters in both games, and some pretty wild finishes as well. So I could see maybe that's why the NFL wants to put them there, but it's still just the fact that the team has not made the playoffs in so long. They're getting these opportunities. It's a little strange, but matchups are appealing.
Yes, I mean, you think about that week 2-1 against the Vikings. What is that? Is that Sunday night or Monday night? I can't remember.
Sunday night.
Okay, that's what I thought. And you got JJ McCarthy, the sort of unproven quarterback of the 6 from that 2024 draft class. But who's next on that list of unproven is Michael Penix, right? We saw a little bit more of Michael Penix than we saw of JJ McCarthy last year. Then we got out, and a big question mark about the Vikings, or I guess it's not a question mark about the Vikings, because everybody just sort of says, hey, look what Kevin O'Connell has done the last couple of years with a lot of other different quarterbacks. JJ McCarthy is going to be just fine. He's got Justin Jefferson, no Jordan Addison in that week 2 game due to a suspension.
That feels coming.
That he is. And that move was made on Wednesday as well. If you guys missed it, Adam Thielen traded from the Panthers to the Vikings to sort of basically fill the shoes of Jordan Addison until he comes back from 3-4 games.
Three games. And can we mention just we don't want to talk about people's arrests. We hope he learns his lesson. But the fact that his arrest was called wet reckless is still one of the funniest things I've ever heard.
Yeah, so I was gonna make a Penix joke, but I just don't have the skills to make that joke, Alan. But
you're no Bill Burr, which is
yeah, I'm not. I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
You got the same hairstyle, Lisa.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you get this Penix versus McCarthy battle, and I think basically bringing up JJ McCarthy and Kevin O'Connell, you contrast that with, at least for me, I do have some concerns about Zach Robinson if he can be on maybe not on the same level as Kevin O'Connell, but like close the gap at least a little bit this year, right? Like that to me is kind of a thing that we kind of need from this Falcon team, right? And particularly with the spotlight on in several of these games.
I thought they played a great 3 quarters against Minnesota in the last matchup. They were going neck and neck, and look, that Vikings team, they went 14-3 last year. I know the playoff game was an abomination, but the Vikings were borderline top 5 team last season. So the fact that the Falcons played really well for 3 quarters, and you saw the offense was moving, and this is with Kirk Cousins on his last legs. So I think how Zach Robinson coped with Brian Flores and the pressures, eventually things did break down, but you have to be encouraged by it. And it's the fact that they really took it to him on the ground. I think the 2 bigger concerns, even though I think the Vikings are going to be very good this year, but when it comes to the offensive side against the Falcons defense, I look at San Fran and Buffalo as huge concerns. We know Buffalo, their running game was arguably, besides maybe Philly and Detroit last year, probably the most efficient. And we saw how they used 6 offensive linemen, and just based on the question marks across the interior line, the Falcons and their linebacker play, just that front in general, a lot of question marks. It's just that could be a real bully ball masterclass by Buffalo and kind of a humbling by Atlanta. Even though I think they're coming off the bye week then.
Yes.
Okay, so hey, preparation. Let's hope. And then San Francisco, Kyle Shanahan kind of ate up Jeff Ulbrich last year.
Yeah, it was rough.
Remember, there was Jordan Mason's coming out party, and that's when the Jets defense was fully healthy and motivated. They weren't jaded yet by good old Aaron Rodgers. You see with the Falcons, their issues up front and just the schematically between Joe Brady and then Kyle Shanahan. I would be very concerned about those 2 matchups. And look, Minnesota is a formidable offense, but I think losing Addison's a big loss just from a dynamic standpoint. But Buffalo and San Fran, I think those are games where there could be some real humblings.
Well, Alan, you talk about some of the concerns on the defense, and I think those are fair ones. But that's a perfect segue to get into some of your predictions on the defensive side of the ball. And you weren't as positive in terms of the 6 predictions that you made on defense, with only 2 of them being considered positive. But I want to get into that, including sort of how much faith should we be putting into these rookies as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy platform that's going to let you turn your football predictions into real rewards. College football is already heating up, and the NFL season isn't far behind. And no matter who you have your eye on, PrizePicks is going to make it easy to get in the game, kicking things off with those max discounts for both college and NFL action. For example, in week 1, Dak Prescott just has to hit more on his 0.5 passing yard projections in PrizePicks. All you got to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. And if you get them right, you cash in and multiply your money. And those max discounts are basically giving you one easy pick. So all you need is just one more, and you can add Michael Penix's stat projections on a more or less, or Arch Manning, Carson Beck, Gunnar Duval Stockton this upcoming weekend. Get in the game by downloading PrizePicks today and use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, run your game. Before we get back into our conversation with Allen Strk of the Falcoholic, we have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make their favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer some questions about our advertising. All you got to do is go to lockedonpodcasts.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes a survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcasts.com/survey. You can find the link also in the description below. Thank you for helping us out. So again, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, Alan wrote a piece on Tuesday over at the Falcoholic where he put together 10, I won't call them bold. I think there are 10 very, very reasonable predictions for the upcoming season. 5 of them positive, 5 of them not so positive, and 6 of them came on the defensive side of the ball where I think it's fair, where we have a lot of question marks that are sort of unknown at this point in time, but only 2 of them were positive, one of them being Jessie Bates getting a career high in terms of creating turnovers this year, double-digit turnovers. James Pierce hitting 8 sacks as a rookie. But the 4 ones that maybe, Alan, you were a little less sold on was Rukaroro and whether or not he's going to step up and be that difference maker potentially in some of these games against these potentially physical fronts and run games like Buffalo and San Francisco. The Falcons linebackers getting exposed in that regard. Their outside cornerback talent level with Mike Hughes maybe getting exposed a little bit, and some concerns about, are we going to get to see these rookies right away, and we'll have the sort of tried and true as we've had so many times over the years with the Atlanta Falcons and trusting in the rookies. We're sitting here in week 3 and 4 and being like, why isn't Billy Bowman and why isn't Xavier Watts getting enough snaps? But
let's highlight that one already looks wrong based on Jordan Fuller being cut. So Raheem Morris not relying on his old Rams pals as much as I thought it would be. So I do want to emphasize that it looks like Xavier Watts will start, or maybe 3 safety looks with DeMarco Hellams as well.
We'll see. I don't know when this episode is coming out, but there's a decent chance that maybe Jordan Fuller's already back on the roster by the time this thing airs. So we'll see on that one. So,
okay.
I want to see these rookies as much as possible. I know there's, just Alan, I don't know if you've been hanging down on Twitter, but there's a civil war going on about Terry Fontenot and how incredible it is. Yes, and I just love seeing my Falcon fans crashing out about a general manager who is, presided over a team that over 4 years has averaged 7.3 wins per season. This is certainly something that requires, strong defense for what he has produced so far this year. But for me, I just look at, a lot of these young players and these draft picks over the last couple of years. I'm like, these guys got to produce. Like, I know people are sitting, you talk about the linebackers. People are concerned about the linebacker, that what happens if Caden Ellis goes down? What happens if Divine Diablo isn't a difference maker? What happens if we have to play J.D. Bertrand or D'Angelo Malone at linebacker? I'm like, good. Let's see what these guys got. I'm ready to find out. I want to be able to join the Terry Fontenot crash out by the end of the season, because we can definitively say whether or not some of his draft picks, contributed in positive ways for this upcoming season.
Strong takes. By the way, did you find it bizarre that D'Angelo Malone was getting a lot of snaps as an edge rusher in preseason, and they're still kind of – I know he's mostly going to be a special teams ace, but if you're going to play him at linebacker, why didn't you play him there in the preseason?
I think this is because they didn't have enough bodies at linebacker, and so they were content to give Nick Kubitz and Caleb Johnson and Ronnie Harris plenty of run there.
And what about Josh Woods?
Yeah, I mean, they were playing him in Bertrand and whatnot, but, with no Caden Ellis playing, no Diablo playing, no Troy Anderson, no Malik Verdon, it's just kind of like, okay, let's just let the we got a half of D'Angelo at linebacker, and that's all we need.
I guess it's preseason, folks.
Preseason.
That's pretty.
I mean, like, you're always going to be left wondering with the Raheem Morris preseason. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I know that's another hot topic, but nevertheless, I just think relying on Divine Diablo, I am very skeptical of that. I just did not find him to be all that impressive during his time with the Raiders, and just particularly against the run, it just seems like he was going the wrong gap too many times, or just finding himself in traffic. I know they're talking about his intelligence and his long arms and his ability in coverage, and look, maybe the schematic changes could be beneficial for him, because I do think the Falcons will mixed up with their fronts. Like, I think the biggest silver line besides having Jalen Walker, James Pierce, is just this scheme hopefully will not be as vanilla as last year, because the Falcons defense was just so vanilla and pedestrian last year. Like, you say, well, Jeff Ulbrich, but he's going to have some aggressive intent, and that could at least make things interesting. Time will tell if the personnel will step up. But yeah, I think that's just the skepticism is just I'm not sure if these players are really up for it. Like, I think it's a lot to ask of a Rukaro after just barely playing his rookie year and coming to the league as a project. Divine Diablo pretty much being viewed as expendable by a Raiders team that literally is starting. Well, I don't know if they're starting, but like they have Jamal Adams, Devin White on their roster. Like it's like 2020 over there, and they viewed Divine Diablo because what was it? 1 year, $7 million he got in free agency.
2 years, 14, I think.
Okay, well, I got the year part right, at least. But nevertheless, it's just I don't see how he could come in. Maybe just look limited resources. We know the Falcons just couldn't really spend free agency, but just to bank on him, I think it's a concern. It's just you look at the spine of the defense, and of course you trust Jessie Bates, but it's just the front and not being able to stop the run. You saw how much a problem it was last year, and now I think just based on the strength of schedule, you go against a lot of teams, even like a team like Carolina who can pose their will against the ground. You saw how much they invested in the interior of their offensive line. It could be very dangerous.
Yes, I've been talking about this a lot with Jarvis Davis here on Locked On Falcons the last couple of weeks, where I think a lot of teams are going to try to play the formula of we're just going to, run it between tackles. We're going to get the Falcons in their nickel front and see, whether or not the Rooks and the David Onyemadas and the Brandon Dorleses can hold up on the interior, Laquale London, all that jazz. And I think there are several teams that will challenge the Falcons in that way. And we'll see if this run defense holds up. I think this team is built to be very complementary. And to me, a lot of my hope and optimism in the defense is not really based off of the defense. A lot of it is based off of the offense and again, I'm going to make a lofty comparison. And I'm not suggesting that the results are going to be the same, but it's similar to that 2016 team that has such a good offense, and their defense wasn't really built to stop the run. We saw what Philadelphia did to them in that game. But, because they were able to play with so many leads, it sort of forced those teams that wanted to run the football to have to kind of abandon the run. And I really feel like that is going to be a necessary component. And again, we talked about that on part one of this conversation. But yeah, I don't think this defense, and particularly this run defense, I'm not that confident or optimistic that it's going to be able to hold up on its own.
Do you think they're going to play much more 3-4 on base downs? Like, do you think that 3-4 will be their base formation?
It does seem that way. Like going into the summer, I didn't think that was going to be the case, but coming out of the preseason, it does feel that is going to be the case.
Yeah, because I would have been intrigued if they stuck with the standard base, if they would have had Braylon Trice and Zach Harrison as the edge defenders, and then have Onyemata and Rojo. I think that could have worked out, but I just based on Trice's limited experience and Zach Harrison playing deep into preseason, doesn't seem like the coaching staff is too keen on that. But then do you really think they're going to insert Dorless as the third guy up front?
Yeah, I imagine as we sit here today, assuming Laquale London's going to get a lot of those nose tackle snaps. And then I just kind of think they're just going to have, and again, we're talking about base, so we're talking about maybe 20, 25% of the plays most weeks. But again, I think certain teams like Carolina, like San Francisco,
Buffalo.
Yeah.
Definitely Buffalo will force them.
Yeah.
Especially with those 6 offensive line packages.
Yeah. So, we'll see if the Falcons, one of the things that Ulbrich did in New York was play a lot of big nickel against Buffalo last year. It didn't really work, but we'll see how they how they try to function with that. And again, that's a way for maybe a guy like DeMarco Hellams to help beef up maybe that front when it comes to putting 3 safeties on the field as we stand here today. But yeah, I think when you look at this, like, I don't know if the base defense, I'm not too worried about the base. I think it's going to be fine. I'm worried about the teams basically saying we're gonna lighten the box with and make you play nickel, and you're not going to be able to put Jalen Walker and James Pierce out there, and those guys are not going to have quite the impact that you want them to have, because we're going to force you to save those guys for, obvious passing situations, which you'll get those opportunities, but maybe they won't be as much as you want them to be if teams are just going to be committed to running the football.
Yeah, it's a problem. It seems like teams are going to be able to dictate how they want to operate their game plan, while the Falcons are going to be reacting instead of being the enforcers. Because obviously, anytime a defense wants to set the tone, generate pressure, and play to their strengths. It's hard to do that when your personnel is limited and you just kind of undersized. And I am curious if Onyemata could improve. Like, I didn't think Onyemata was that bad last year. It's just 2023 was just so impressive, and it just seemed like in moments where you want him to step up, it wasn't quite there. But I'm wondering if could we potentially see a resurgence, because there is a quality player there. It's just I don't know if the scheme last year really hampered him, but then again, just like he needs to be accountable. Like, I thought he really struggled taking on those double teams, but then again, maybe someone like little Kale London could free him and give him more favorable matchups.
Yeah. We'll see. I know you talk about Rook. A lot of people are expecting Rook to kind of fill the Grady Jarrett shoes, and I'm like, you kind of need David Onyemata to fill those shoes, because the Falcons, in their infinite wisdom, were like, hey, we're not going to pay Grady Jarrett $20 million, but we're definitely going to pay David Onyemata $17 million as far as cap space goes this year. So we need to see a resurgence from David Onyemata, but we'll see if the veteran player provides that. I want to focus a little bit more on some of these young pieces, like a James Pierce, who you did project to get 8 sacks, and again, talk a little bit about some of those guys in the secondary, as well as Jalen Walker, and we'll do that to wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. So we do a lot of pumping on this podcast, and we're going to do so much this season when we talk about Michael Penix, and I want to make sure y'all are ready, and that means you got to be Rugiet ready, the next gen prescription treatment that goes beyond Viagra and Cialis. It's designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. You don't need to wait hours, because Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula is going to dissolve under your tongue and kick in on average 15 minutes. So it kicks in fast, and the effects can last up to 36 hours, so that you can stay confident and in control and when the moment is right. So get your pump on by heading to rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL to use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, and manufacturing review. Please visit Rugiet website for full safety information. Now that the NFL season is almost here, FanDuel is going to make sure you're ready for kickoff with this can't miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300. I said $300 in bonus bets to use across the app and across the FanDuel app. There are so many different ways to win. It's always keeping things interesting. If you're thinking, so it's going to be a big week for Bijan Robinson, hey, go with a player prop. If you think a bunch of different things could happen in a game, you get that hunch, go with the same game parlay, right? Just get a little bit of that action on the side, just to make things a little bit more interesting on Saturdays and Sundays throughout this fall. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com, and to place your first $5 bet. Here with Allen Strk, talking about this Falcons defense. And you made a prediction about James Pierce hitting 8 sacks as a rookie. And you've already mentioned how your prediction about the rookies maybe not seeing the field as quickly as we would ideally want already seems to be off track due to the release of Jordan Fuller. I guess I asked the question to you, Allen. Are we putting too much stock in rookies, or do you think this is the right amount for the Falcons?
Oh, they need to put all the stock in the rookies. I don't think that's a rash decision either. I just think this defense desperately needs speed. They were just so slow last year, and they were aging, and you could say what they want about Jimmy Lake, but there was too many openings across the midfield. The edge rushing was non-existent. So you need to give these players opportunities, even a year where this team obviously needs to make the playoffs. But when you put these draft investments and you look at their pedigrees, like I think all 4 players played big time schools. They're well equipped in these moments. Like, just get them out there, and I think should all be upgrades in those respective spots. Like, you look at the current personnel that's either ahead of them or kind of competing with them. I don't think there's a big vast difference. Like, I know Leonard Floyd is a good finisher and he's a contributor, but Leonard Floyd isn't winning consistently one-on-one. Like, I do think he's not quite like trying to feed off scraps like Matthew Judon was last year, but Leonard Floyd isn't exactly good at bull rush or win on a spin move or convert speed to power and win you need hopefully Jalen Walker, Jace Pierce do that. And look, Arnold McKetty might have some moments. I think he really came on at the end of last year, but give the guys that you invested in. And it looks like Jalen Walker, from all indications, I don't like your take on this. It seems like he's going to be purely an edge this year. Like, I don't think we'll see him much at linebacker. Do you agree with that?
We'll see. I've felt from the jump that Jalen Walker creates more mismatches as a rushing linebacker, basically in the same role that Caden Ellis occupies. That I think he's, like Caden Ellis, like if you put Caden Ellis as a full-time edge, like Caden Ellis is not going to be as effective as he was in that role. And I feel like Jalen Walker's a similar style player, a souped up version of Caden Ellis potentially, as opposed to a guy that I think you can just line up at edge and expect him to win consistently in that regard. And so I wonder if as we get further in the season, if stressing if that becomes an accurate take, will the Falcons be looking at, their 4 or 5 best pass rushers being, James Pierce, Arnold Bichetti at edge, Jalen Walker, Caden Ellis lining up in those A and B gaps, and then whoever people think is going to be the best D tackle, whether that's Brandon Dorlus, Zach Harrison, David Onyemata, Rook Aurora.
I think the coach staff desperately forget the coach staff. The entire organization needs Rook to be up there, just based on the expectations they're putting on him.
Okay, I'm not putting those expectations on Rook. That's personally. I know that the team did that, but I sit here and I go like, Rook did not choose to be taken over Braden Fisk and Johnny Newton. Like, I'm not expecting him to come in and produce like those guys.
I agree with that too. Just, you want to look at the top 5 pass rushers on the roster. Kind of want Rook to be in there.
Yeah, I want Rook to be in there, but I'm just like, I'm not going into the season expecting him to be there.
Okay, gotcha. But then you look at the other 2 rookies, like in particular, like, do you think D. Alford, do you think his issues really came down to scheme last year, or do you think he really underperformed as a player? Because it just seemed like he was at that position constantly and he was a step behind on a lot of completions.
Well, I think the scheme had something to do with it, because the thing that D. Alford was good at prior to last year was he was pretty good when you put him on like number 3 wide receivers, right? He was always not great against number 1s and number 2s, in my opinion, charting the defense in 22 and 23. But it was never to a point where opposing teams were really going after him with those guys. But last year you saw a drop off with his performance against number 3s, and then you saw teams basically really going after him and trying to exploit him with number 1s and number 2s. And so I think the scheme had something to do with that, but at the end of the day, he just didn't execute. And that's, for me, like, I'm not the most optimistic when it comes to what Billy Bowman's going to be, but I'm just like, might as well see what he's got, to sort of piggyback on the point you were making.
Yeah, agree with you there. It just, you do have to be a little cautious just with Bowman's lack of experience there, because he was kind of like a Swiss Army knife, his background. But he was lined up in like 4 different areas. So I know he's been working extensively as a nickel quarter, and I do think having that versatility could be exciting, and how they want to mix things up, maybe play a little more dime, or utilize him as a blitzer more. But nevertheless, it's just, I'm skeptical of D. Alford kind of cementing his place as the nickel corner. So you would hope that Billy Bowman can make strides and be that player, because it just seemed like, I don't know if Alford, not just in man coverage, but just the way how late he was diagnosing certain routes. Like, it's just the lack of anticipation could be a big concern, especially given how much zone they played last year. And I know they're going to play more man this year, but I never really watched the offense. Thought it was great in man coverage either.
Yeah, I thought he was better in man coverage than he was in zone for those lack of awareness reasons that you mentioned, but it wasn't as if he was a lockdown man coverage guy or anything like that.
He was good at like destroying screens. I remember like the early part of the Ron Nielsen era. He was breaking up some plays.
Yeah. We've seen good play from D. Alford. We just haven't seen it lately. So I'll be curious to see where Billy Bowman lands. Like, I feel like Billy Bowman can handle the number 3s, going back to the earlier point, but I'm still skeptical whether or not he's going to solve your ability to deal with the number 1 and number 2 receiver. So to me, I'll be curious to see where Billy Bowman has, but like, I'm hoping that we can get something from Billy Bowman that's similar to early Alford, which is solid to serviceable. Is that a fair way of putting it? Do you agree with that?
I agree with that. And look, he based on his pedigree, like he's a pretty serious ball hawk. So, and this defense really struggled to force turnovers last year. Players not named Jessie Bates, of course. So you hope if he could cause 2 or 3 turnovers, that could just sway everything. It's amazing how a player's reputation can be enhanced by just interception year, deflection. Like, those are game-changing plays that just based on what he did at Oklahoma, he's capable of doing. Some Xavier Watts as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jessie Bates. You one of your predictions was a career high double-digit turnovers this upcoming season, in counting what interceptions, forced fumbles, those types of things.
Interceptions, forced fumbles, and fumble recovery. So he's had 9 in 2 seasons. So in 2023, he had 6 interceptions and 3 fumbles. 3 fumbles forced, no fumble recoveries. Last year, he had 4 interceptions, 4 fumbles forced, and 1 fumble recovery. And I just think, even though he did capitalize on some pretty terrible quarterback play in those 2 seasons, I just think there's going to be more opportunities. I know teams are going to run the ball a bit, but he is so good at punching the ball out. And I do think at times he could have, I don't know if he dropped the interception, but he was in like position to make a better play. And I just don't think he's going to have to be in hero mode as much. Like last year, there were games, that Denver game where he was just trying to, and Minnesota, where he was just trying to do way too much. Like he was trying to fill in gaps, and it was just like, I understand it's a lot to handle. This defense is a mess, but you're doing yourself the service now. You're taking yourself away from plays, and you're not even coming close. That's leading to extra yak opportunities. So I think now with hopefully the secondary being a little bit more stabilized and coverages being more varied, he's going to have more opportunities. So that was the basis behind that. And the guy just gets after the ball like that. That strip fumble, the way he stripped, I think it was it Bucky Irving or Rashad White? I think it was Bucky Irving.
Bucky Irving sounds right.
Yeah, like that's just one of those plays. Like, just how can you not believe in this guy? And I just he's been on the cusp. And if the Falcons defense, with hopefully Bowman and Watts playing more, start getting more pass breakups, he could probably capitalize on a deflection here or there and intercept it. So, and look, they're gonna play the Saints twice, and those Saints quarterbacks, I don't know who's it gonna be, but they're gonna throw some passes up. And look, all this talk about Bryce Young. Bryce Young does put the ball in harm's way, so he's gonna have opportunities.
Okay. Yeah. I'm nervous about Tyler Strk because the Falcons love stinking against rookies. That's all I say. I don't believe in Tyler Strk, but the Falcons love going up against a Will Levis or a Bryce Young and crapping the bed. So I
don't think Bryce Young played good against them though. In either matchup, I just
sure,
think the second matchup they completely shot themselves a foot. But even the first game, Bryce Young threw 2 softies at Jessie.
Yeah, no, but that's the problem with the Falcons. Like, you don't need these quarterbacks to play elite. The Falcons always find a way to just completely choke these games away. But hey, it's going to be different this time, Alan. So we'll see if the opportunistic defense shows up. Again, I think a lot of that is related to this aggressive attack style, complementing a high value offense, a high explosive offense that is going to force defenses to have to, air it out in order to try to keep pace with this offense. And so I think, the potential is there. The potential is absolutely there. So we will see what the Falcons defense brings to the table. But Alan, I really do appreciate, you hanging out with me, chopping it up, talking about offense, talking about defense. The season's right around the corner. Any sort of parting thoughts for the listeners before we duck out of here?
It's going to be exciting. I know it could be frustrating, but you get these big matchups, divisions up for grabs. I think there's still a lot of excitement to be had. Temper the expectations a little bit. Understand that, especially with the defense. No temper expectations. Okay.
No. They got to go out there and score 34 points week 1 against Tampa Bay.
Oh, absolutely. No, they have to score 3 points to Tampa defense, especially if Deion Jones is going to be playing 60 snaps. Like, come on now. But I do think be cautious with his defense. I think it's going to be a real steep learning curve, and look, they're going up against some real potent offenses early on. So, give it time. Let's see how they use the personnel. I do think people should be more encouraged with Jeff Ulbrich. I just think that Jets team just really checked out. I do think Jeff Ulbrich's better than what was shown on the field last year for that diabolical organization. So just give it time defensively, but offensively, even without Caleb McGarry, let's see them explode.
Well, Alan, I'll just say this. Look, I'm not too worried about Elijah Wilkinson because the last thing that this offensive coordinator is going to do, he's not going to leave in right tackle on the island against one of the best speed rushers in the NFL and Haason Reddick. Like, that's He's not gonna do that, right?
Listen, Haason Reddick didn't play football last year. Let's wait and see what Haason Reddick.
Okay, I'm excited. Like, this is not an offensive coordinator that is known for putting overmatched right tackles against top speed rushers on an island in a week 1 game. That's all I'm saying.
Live and learn.
It's never happened before. So, guys, that's going to do it for us here on this illustrious episode of Locked On Falcons. Continue to make us your first listen as we keep this thing rolling, gearing you up for that week 1 action. And you can make Locked On Falcons your first listen by checking us out on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out that Locked On podcasts.com/survey. And, of course, for your second listen, check out the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. It is all part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.